Hey everybody, welcome back to Something to Complain About. This is A. I'm here with T. T, how's it going?
Oh, it's going well, A. I have to tell you, and I think you have also watched this show, not bringing,
Upper
Upper,
Middle Bogan?
Upper Middle Bogan. Thank you. I had a brain fart.
That's okay.
And the reason why I thought of this show is, as you know, it's about a doctor who finds out that she was adopted. And throughout the course of the series, we see how overprotective her adoptive mother was with her. And whereas her birth family, they are always doing all these adventurous things, and her birth mother is a drag racer. And it made me think about this as we start talking about Gen X safety, that, there's a lot of differences. And I was thinking too that, like, the main character, she would be Gen X because she would be about our age, but grew up in a very different environment where she was hyper protected. But then you see some examples of almost negligence or typical Gen X rearing from the birth parents.
Yes, I did watch it after you recommended it. We sort of marathon watched it for a few days. The the biological parents in that show very much Gen X raisers, right? Like, I don't know if they were Gen X and she was just super, super young or they were young when they had her. Cause she still strikes me as Gen X, but the parents also sort of strike me as like either very tail end boomery or
Mhm.
early Gen X. Cause they're very much like, walk it off, whatever. Like it'll be fine.
That's
And her adoptive mom is the opposite, like helicopter, hyperprotective, Freudian to a point. So it was a fun show to watch. Yeah. I kind of wish they went to stopped at season 3 or whatever it was.
no, I know. It was hilarious. And I also ended up binge watching it. And I think I watched it in like 3 days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we did it in like less than a week, just in the evenings, watched a couple episodes because they were only 20-minute episodes or something. They weren't super long,
Yeah.
but yeah, it was a funny show. Definitely would recommend it for any Gen Xers out there who want something a little different to see.
That also makes me think of, especially as we start on our next few episodes talking about safety. And I don't know if you have seen F is for Family.
No.
Oh, you would probably enjoy it. It's animated, and I think it's Bill Burr who it's based on his childhood, but it takes place like in 1974, early
All right.
70s. And so a lot of the parenting that you see there, and again, just the general approach to safety and child rearing, it's pretty good. There's some uh, little heavier pieces, I think, to that compared to Upper Middle Bogan, but it was still a very good show. So I'd recommend that one to you as well.
F is for family. Is
F
that what
is
it's
for
called?
Family.
Okay.
Yep,
Cool.
on Netflix. So we got our Netflix plug in
There we go.
and
They're
Upper
not
Middle
paying
Bogan.
us for that plug-in, but we're just saying it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like, we
They
only
can if
have
they want to.
we don't have the audience for it yet.
Okay, so then we should just let our audience know that it's their job to just like boomerang expand for us, right? Like share and like and subscribe and get all your friends. We say this every time. Like everybody should know what we're
we
talking about.
Yeah, but the other day I was listening to a channel on YouTube, and they specified that when you subscribe to the channel, it's free. It's no cost to you. So I'm thinking we might need to start like advertising that piece. That you just click subscribe.
Subscriptions are free.
These are free and the likes are free.
I'm guessing that the audience at this point probably already can tell that today we're both slightly more punchy than usual. So it should be a pretty fun episode for us.
It should. And today we're going to be talking about vehicle safety and growing up, Gen X. And I think in short, we know that really there wasn't much
Much.
going on.
Yes, this is true. What made us think of this? Something made us think of this. I don't remember what it was. Do you remember what it was?
Oh, because I think it started with when we were brainstorming and I shared about my family's car accident
Oh, that's right.
because we the the way we were in the car, the way we were positioned in the car
Mhm.
would actually terrify or anybody who's under about 40. Anybody over 40 would be like, oh yeah, we rode in the car like that all the time. We in the fall of 1982, and you're going to appreciate this being a country boy yourself.
Yeah.
It was about 2 weeks into pheasant season.
Oh,
So right around Thanksgiving, right before Thanksgiving.
yeah.
And we were taking a gravel road
Mhm.
to my grandparents' town to go to church. We were heading to Mass.
Okay.
And my mom blew a tire and we ended up in the ditch. And I don't remember if we rolled or what, but I remember we ended up in the ditch and we were all very injured because we were not wearing seatbelts.
Yeah,
And
that
I
wasn't the
was the
thing we did
oldest.
much of early on in our lives.
Oh, not in 1982.
No.
And so I was in the front seat and I was 6. I had just turned 6. I was in the front seat. My little 6-year-old face hit the dashboard. And I actually have 2 scars on my face from that. My brother was not quite 4. He was mad because it was my turn to sit in the front seat.
Yeah.
So he was standing in the back seat with
Yeah.
his arms crossed.
Normal.
And my sister was also in the back seat and she hit her head and her face somewhere because she ended up with a shiner.
Okay.
And the reason why I brought up hunting season was fortunately we were found, I think, fairly quickly because 2 young men who decided to ditch Mass that morning
And go
and go
pheasant
hunting
hunting?
instead and go pheasant hunting
Mm.
instead found us. And so they got us out of the car and um yeah, and they called in on the CB and we went to the hospital. So so I was 6 years old sitting in the front seat. Nobody had seatbelts on. My brother's standing up in the back seat because he's all bent out of shape because it was my turn to ride up in front. And I'm sure for some of our listeners, they're like, okay, red flag, red flag, red flag, red flag.
Now they would be red flags, but back then
No,
this was
they
not a red
weren't.
flag. This was normal.
It was normal. It
I
was
mean, did your car
normal.
even have seatbelts? I mean, we had a car at one point that did not even have seatbelt. I mean, we didn't use it much, but I remember my grandparents had a vehicle too that it was old enough out on the farm. It did not have seatbelts.
I honestly don't remember, but I would imagine if there were seatbelts, they were tucked into the seat. Because do you remember being a kid and people getting mad about the seatbelts just hanging out and poking you in the butt? So you would just shove them in the
Yes.
seat.
Yeah. I mean, people still do that.
Yep.
So
They do.
I was looking this up as we were talking about it. 1968, so 8, 9 years before we were born, federal law required that all new vehicles would have seatbelt. So it's very likely that there were Gen Xers who absolutely grew up without seatbelt because
No,
it's very likely they
especially,
had cars that never had them. I mean, we
well,
probably
yeah.
had cars that did at some point, certainly, because we came around almost a decade later, but that's a long period of time to not have seatbelts, right? Like,
Mhm. That
so
is. Well, and I think too, I mean, with that, there's a law, but then like the behavior really didn't start to change until about almost 20 years later
right.
because um, Barbara Mandrell, who is a country singer, she had that huge accident in the early 80s. And I
Yeah.
think what saved her life was that she was wearing a seatbelt.
Yeah.
So I remember a lot of those campaigns. My family, we were early adopters. Right after that accident, we then did start wearing seatbelts
I'm sure.
in our new car because that car got totaled. But I often think back and I think I had a concussion because I did lose, first of all, head injury. But I remember one of the young men carrying me into the truck with him, and he had his arm wrapped around me when he was CBing in. And I remember getting into the ambulance, but then I don't remember anything until like waking up when our family doctor was shining the little pen light in my eye.
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
also am still very pissed off that my brother did not have to stay at the hospital that night. I had to stay there because I had to be under observation along with my sister and my mom who broke her foot. But my brother got to go home with grandpa and grandma.
So I mean, he probably thought that was fair because you got to ride in the front seat. So
That is
that was the
true.
big
And
deal. Like, that was the big
and
deal. We used to fight
it
about who got
was.
to ride in the front seat if there was only one parent in the car.
Oh yeah. Well, and then growing up with a single mom, like we were on a constant rotation. Like
Of course.
we even tracked mileage and time.
Of course.
Like, like I only got to ride in front when we went to the grocery store, and that was 3.2 minutes and 8 tenths of a mile. But I remember being so delighted that my brother threw up at grandpa and grandma's house.
Which could also have been an indication of a head injury.
Yeah, but we really didn't care about things like that back then.
Nope, we didn't. Nobody did. Just
And
walk it
so
off.
I will always remember, which makes me think my head injury might have been worse than I thought. But now I will always wonder if my little 6-year-old head, when it smacked up against that dashboard, I could have gotten a PhD in physics and math.
So you think you may have lost a few brain cells?
I'm pretty sure I lost a lot of brain cells all over that ditch in north central Kansas. Like somewhere out there is my ability to understand basic calculus.
Yeah, that's fair.
Like I could have performed miracles. So
Probably
yeah,
could have.
after that, we wore seatbelts all the time.
I don't
And
remember when we started wearing them, but I do remember we had that. Often we had to dig them out of the seat, kind of like you talked about. Uh,
mhm,
I do remember we went on a long road trip with my grandparents, my mom's parents, from North Dakota all the way out to Washington State. And there mid 70s Chevy, it would have had seatbelts, but like we didn't use them, right? Like
Well,
it was my grandparents, my parents, and my brother and I in the car the whole way out there. I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but we did it. We were not seatbelted ever in that on that trip. And honestly, a lot of the times when we would go out to visit my grandparents because they lived 7 hours away from where I grew up, we would leave after school on a Friday and we would drive late into the night. So more often than not, because we had a minivan, right, back then, even though there were seatbelts in it, and it was probably I don't know if it was the law or not. In fact, I don't think it was the law, but we would take our pillow and a blanket because at some point we'd go to sleep, right? Like we'd get to grandma and
really?
grandpa's at like midnight. So we were kids. We'd been passed out in the car long before that. So we weren't buckled in to anything. So I mean, we just didn't spend a whole lot of time ever seatbelted on the farm. When we were on the farm, we weren't seatbelted in any of those vehicles, trucks, cars, grain trucks, nothing. There were no we didn't do any seatbelts. We were standing up a lot. I never hit my
Well,
head on a dash though, so apparently my ability to do calculus remained intact.
there you go. One thing this makes me think of is like growing up, we would just cram people into a vehicle,
Yes,
right?
we would. You'd sit on each
Whereas,
other's lap.
whereas, right. Whereas today, it's totally like I have 5 seat belts, so there's only 5 people that can ride. But I
Yep.
mean, how many times growing up did you end up having somebody on your lap or you were sitting on somebody else's lap? And then the only safety measure taken was if we're in an accident, sit as still as you can.
I remember that part. Like, I don't
It's
remember
like,
anybody ever saying that part, but we even did that in high school. Like, if we would
yeah,
wanna go over
yeah.
lunch to, down okay, I mean, it was such a small town, but, like, the grocery store had a bakery. I would
Well,
not wanna call
wait
it
a
a
minute.
deli.
Wait a minute. They let you free during lunch in high school?
We were seniors.
They
That
didn't let
2nd
us do that.
semester. Oh,
Oh,
yeah, no,
hell no.
we could have
We were
senior
imprisoned.
privileges. Oh, yeah, no, we were able to if we had a grade average above a certain point and we had a study hall, we could leave and go get lunch if we had a note from our parents. So, like, we would drive the 5 minutes down the street to the grocery store, which was literally the other end of town, and they had I mean, they called it the deli, but, like, it's not a deli like you would think of in any other normal city. It was like they made like gas station pizza, right? Like that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
They had a little bakery back there, so they also made a bunch of rolls and stuff because we had the factory in town. So very, very busy in the morning with the factory traffic going back and forth. But we would go for lunch and go get a pizza, but you'd put as many people into your car as you could so that not everybody had to drive and you all wanted to be together because I don't know, you were teenagers. Sure.
Yeah,
Nobody
that
wore a
sounds pretty
seatbelt.
reasonable.
Yeah, totally reasonable. And you're just like, we're only going 8 blocks. Like, it doesn't make any difference. But like, we didn't have a primary seatbelt law in North Dakota. I actually had to look it up for this episode. 2023 was when
Oh,
North Dakota
wow.
got a primary seatbelt law, which was, and I don't know if this is the same everywhere, but in North Dakota, when they say primary, it means that you can get picked up if they can tell you're not wearing it. Whereas before 2023, you were required to wear it, but it was a secondary thing. So if you got pulled over for speeding and they could tell you weren't wearing it, you would get 2 tickets,
Then it
right?
would. Yeah.
So that was the deal.
I I remember trying to get a seatbelt to stretch across 2 people.
Me too. And
But
back then,
one
most of us
thing
were skinny enough it would probably work. Not today.
oh, yeah, that's true. I mean, it was like a size 5 and a size 5 back then. So and I was the biggest one of the biggest of my friends. I mean, wide, not tall. Um, because otherwise then my friends would have had to be like little people. Um,
Yeah.
I was the shortest of
Did
my
you ever?
friend group. I'm the shortest of any friend group I'm a part of.
That's fair.
But
I mean, did you ever get like, so we know seatbelts in cars were, we were all stood up in our cars. We sat on each other's laps. We took naps, we
Mhm.
did whatever. Did you ever ride in the back of a pickup truck?
Yeah.
Okay. No
I
seatbelts
went
back there.
I went across the state in the back of a pickup truck, although
Yep.
my dad had a camper on top of that one. And every so often, he'd slide the little window at the back of the
Hmm.
cab to yell back at us to pull body parts back inside, quit
Hmm.
dangling stuff out,
Yeah.
um, because of the popo.
It's your own
Um,
van.
but yeah, I've rode in the back of pickups all the time, like, especially if somebody was moving something, because how else are you going to make sure that the furniture doesn't shift or the mattress doesn't fly off? You got to be out there holding it, right?
You do. I mean, it was ropes had not been invented at this point on tie downs. Obviously, we used humans for that.
Sometimes you used your children for it, and for a bonus, quite often the
The neighbor.
dog
Oh, yeah.
is part there too.
Yeah. That's it. Very much.
But yeah, it was
It go
great.
where most of us survive,
Well, wait
which,
till you hear this story.
oh,
Now, granted, this one is going to be a story of bad parenting, no matter what generation. But as you know, my paternal uncle was a member of a very special motorcycle club.
yes. Yes. Yeah.
And so when my dad would come to visit, we would take my uncle's hog out for rides.
Yeah.
And of course, I loved it. And, I love motorcycles, especially love Harleys. I'm a good bike bitch. I've never fallen off.
Yeah.
And I remember one time being 5. So again, this would be like 81, 82. My dad got onto my uncle's hog and he said he was going to take my brother and I for a ride. So I was 5, my brother was 3. Somebody picked me up, put me on the seat behind my dad, and my dad said, "Hold on to my shirt."
Yeah.
So I grabbed fistfuls of my dad's shirt,
Mhm.
and then someone picked up my 3-year-old brother and plopped him in the middle of us. And then
You
I
were the
was told
safety
not
harness for your brother.
uh, and thank
Yep.
you for my brother, because I was told to not let my brother fly off. And then my dad took off and we went on gravel.
And your mother found this to be
Mom,
grounds for divorce, probably?
and I know they were already divorced.
Oh,
My
okay.
mother, my mother apparently did not know until
Oh,
like
uh-oh.
20, 25 almost 25 years later. And my brother and I were telling her, because I was like, "Hey, do you remember when Dad took us out on Uncle B's bike?" And my brother's like, "Yeah, I kind of remember that. That was fun." And my mom's like, didn't really think much of it because she knew we always rode,
Mhm.
or, after a certain age that we always rode, and then we had ridden. And, but then when I told her what Dad did, and like you could see the lava rising. And I remember she's like, "He did what?" And I'm like, "Yeah." I go, "It was fine. We were fine. We didn't wipe out." And
I mean, that easily could have resulted in you losing more of your brain cells, so we should be
I get
grateful.
I mean, can you imagine? I probably weighed, what, at age 5, maybe 60,
Yeah.
70 pounds at the time.
Mhm.
My little 3-year-old brother hit a bump wrong or wipe out. We would have flown
Yep.
yards.
Yep. And no helmet,
Yards.
right? No helmet.
What? Yeah. No helmet. I'm pretty sure I was wearing shorts and sandals.
Yep. That's how we did it. again, we are lucky we survived. And I don't know that this is a survival of the fittest Darwinian kind of surviving. This is more just like we got freaking lucky as hell, and that's how we
I,
survived.
I think back on that day, and I think we all cheated Darwin
We
that
did.
day.
We did. In lots of ways. We used to do that
And
too, right? Like we used to get on the bikes when we were at my grandparents. It was out on the farm. It was all gravel roads. There was no other way to get out there. And three-wheelers, four-wheelers, you name it, whatever. And there were no helmets, wide open, crazy kids. It's we are very, very fortunate that we survived because there was
so,
no real safety thinking in any of that. Today would not happen. Mostly would not.
well, and I think like, did you ever ride? And I think it's called a front loader where you got the kind of the bucket
Yep.
in the front or the shovel
On
in the
the
front, kind of like a tractor.
yep.
Yeah. We used to climb into that, and my uncle would raise us up high,
Hmm.
and then he would just take us out to the fields and
And drive
stuff
around.
and drive around. You know,
Because it
5 kids
was fun. It was cool.
and the farm dog. Yeah.
Yeah.
And just
You
messing
had the dog in the
around and
bucket.
yeah.
I don't think our dogs would have been okay in the bucket, but yeah, I mean, we did that quite a bit.
I mean, their dog, he was awesome. He was a collie,
So you just chilled out.
and I love oh yeah, I loved him. Like he was like the best dog for the 18 million children running around that farm. So yeah, wherever we were, he was with us. So we climbed into the bucket. So did the dog. And because I remember at one point, for whatever reason, we went to a cornfield in the bucket. And I turned my head really fast and my glasses were loose and I lost my glasses in the cornfield.
Yeah.
We found them. But you know how hard it is to find something in a cornfield, especially when it's your glasses and you like
We used
really, really
this is
need them?
certainly not this is definitely for a different episode, but let's just say we used to play hide and go seek in the cornfield, so I definitely know how hard it is to find something in a cornfield. Much bigger than glasses, but yes, glasses would be horribly difficult to find in a cornfield. So we know motorcycles were their own fun. Did you guys have car seats? Was that a thing? Like we did not have I don't remember us having car seats for
Oh,
anybody until my cousin
no.
started to like it. Maybe I just wasn't aware of it because my brother was 3 years younger than me. I don't think I would remember a car seat for him necessarily, but I don't really remember until maybe my cousins who are about 10 years younger than me, maybe 12 years younger than me. I remember them having
Mm,
some type of car seat, but like car seats were not even required until the mid 80s, right? For kids, kids were not required to be
yeah.
in a safety seat until 1985 or 1986 across the country. So, I mean, they've obviously car seats have evolved a lot since then. They are safer. We've gone from the like you can put them anywhere you want, you can face them any direction you want to some kids need to be in everybody needs to be in the back seat, I think. I don't think you're supposed to ever put them in the front seat anymore, but we used to put them in
No.
the front seat. Um, them in the front seat until the laws started to change.
I have a cousin who was born like in 1985, and I do remember her being in the car seat.
Yeah,
Even then, I think the reason why I remember that is because that still was a bit of an anomaly.
right.
I think it was just like a car seat and the child
Yeah,
like grew into it. It's not all the different sized ones and specialized
right.
and that. So, which
They go through
then
lots of them now. Like
they
people with little
they
kids go
do.
through multiple types of car seats. I mean, I still have, I have cousins with kids now who are even 8, 9, or 10 years old, and they're sitting in what they don't call them car seats, they're car seats, but they call them booster seats or whatever because they don't weigh enough. The laws now apparently in most states have a weight threshold, right? You have to be in a
Yes.
specific kind of safety seat until you are X number of inches tall and X number of pounds. um, just because we know that's safer. That was not a thing for us. Once you were old enough to sit on your own and hold yourself up, you got well, I mean, we didn't get seat belted in, but we didn't sit in a car seat anymore. So, like, that's weird. But I
Well,
still remember my aunts, like, nursing their kids in the car
oh,
driving
yeah.
down the road at
Oh,
70
yeah.
miles an hour, right? Like, that was not a strange thing to see happen. Now you'd pull over and you'd feed the baby and then you'd put the baby back in the car seat and keep on driving. Like, they wouldn't do that, but not us.
This makes me think of, like, when I told you that my family right away after that accident, we started using seatbelts.
Yeah, makes
My
sense.
my 4-year-old brother and 3-year-old sister were in regular seatbelt
Yeah.
because that's all we just started wearing seatbelts. It really does make me wonder, though, like, how in the hell did our parents take us home from the hospital?
They probably just held us. Do you think either both of our moms are C's? Do you think either C was strapped in? I doubt it. They were
What?
probably sore because they had just delivered. I don't know. I was not C-section, so maybe I don't know. Were you C-section?
That was not.
Okay, so they didn't have to worry about a surgical scar necessarily, but they couldn't have felt very comfortable going home after popping out. Although, let's be real, they did stay in the hospital longer back then. I mean, like, today
Well,
you go home,
okay.
like, the next day often, but
Considering I almost killed my mom and she almost killed me while I was in utero, my mom did feel better once I was out,
fair.
regardless of everything else, because,
But
then, like, her.
you'd still think it would have to be an uncomfortable ride home, right? Like, I'm
Yeah,
sure
but
they carried us because I don't there are no
I'm
pictures
really
of me in a car seat. That's the thing. You would think that there would be.
I'm really wondering where J and C put me in the vehicle,
Your mom
and I
helped
will never.
you.
Are you sure?
Well,
Like,
it's either
you
that
met.
or your grandma held you. Maybe grandma was in the car with you. Like, that was pretty common back then too. Grandparents would be at the hospital anyway. So
Yeah, that's
maybe grandma held
true.
you in the back seat, but
Or
no, I
maybe
mean,
with the Harley and the Dawn.
could have been. You could have been in the sidecar with your mom, and that might have been
You told little neonate T.
right. I mean, I don't know how
Well,
far you had to go. How far was where you were born from where you lived?
oh, what? Probably about 15, 20 miles.
Yeah, see, we were 50 miles. Like, the hospital was 50 miles from where my parents lived. Or at the time, I guess it was 40 miles, but, I'm sure that little car they had to not it had to be a very rough ride, and I am guessing that it was not a comfortable thing. I don't know who was with my parents, but I would bet money somebody was just holding on to me, and that was all there was to it. Because I mean, you would like, we have pictures of us in high chairs, right? We have pictures of us in all kinds of things, but there are no pictures of my brother and I that I've ever seen of one of us in a car seat ever. And we have pictures of my nephew in a car seat. We have pictures of my cousins in car seat. So I
So
don't think we were put in a car seat to be taken home. I think somebody just they wrapped us up tight and they held us in their arms and told our dads to be careful. And that was it. Which is also kind of
this
the story of our lives, right?
it really explains why my grandmother was always insistent that everybody have a St. Christopher's medal in their vehicle.
As did mine.
Mhm. That's because that was the only way we could stay safe. Because you do not drive a car without a St. Christopher's medal in it.
I have had
Because
I will say this, I have not had a St. Christopher's medal in my car since I got a car. So, I don't know if that's bad or not, but that was definitely something we had in our car when we were growing up.
I still have a St. Christopher's medal in my car because I still believe in the magical part of Catholicism, the magical thinking,
Yeah.
where, this little medal will keep me safe. I mean, I'm still alive. So,
Yeah, fair.
And that's pretty much all we can say about that.
I mean, so you got concussed at 6 and began wearing
Yes.
seatbelts. I don't really remember when we began wearing seatbelts. I think we were probably 8, 9, 10, maybe a little bit older. That it was a little bit more common, but it was also not rigidly enforced, right? Like, obviously, like when we would be driving out and we were driving late and we would need to sleep or something, we were not buckled up. I remember there were
Mhm.
times we would try to buckle up and lay down and go to sleep, but it was extremely uncomfortable and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know when it became flat out ticketable offense in North Dakota. It was probably in the late 80s, I would bet. So we were always like, it's not like we ever got pulled over. I mean, my dad, even back then, always drove just a couple miles under the speed limit, right? That's kind of still what he does. Um,
That is such a country thing to do.
I mean, I have never driven a couple miles under the speed limit in my entire life. So I don't know. I did not get that gene, which is also like my mom. My mom does not have that gene. She's always, if she doesn't set cruise, she's got the radio on. And as the radio gets louder, her foot gets heavier. So that's how that works. And I'm kind of like that too. But we didn't have the seatbelt issue. We rode around in the back of trucks. We rode around on motorcycles, holding on to the person in front of us for dear life. I would hold on to belt loops, not as
Yeah.
much the t-shirt, but I'd hook into the belt loops until my grandmother one day was like, you could just rip that belt loop off. Like, that's probably not the safest thing to do. So then I would wrap my fingers under the belt. Like, I would wrap my
There
fingers
you
under my
go.
uncle's belt because I knew that leather belt was not going to break. My fingers might, but the belt wasn't going to break. So I didn't have to worry about the belt loops. And we didn't wear helmets with anything, not normal
Yeah.
bikes, not motorbikes, motorcycles, whatever you want to call them. Like, we did not three wheelers, four wheelers. We didn't do any of that. And we some we somehow escaped Darwin in all of it. So that's kind of fun.
Darwin Darwin was hibernating at that time.
We're grateful for his slumber because God knows we tempted fate on many an occasion. And I would think today the people like Gen Zers are probably, if there are any Gen Zers listening to this, they're got to be like, how are you people that dumb? Like, you should have known that was dangerous. But
We
that is
didn't know
really
about we didn't know about physics till about 1986, maybe. I don't know.
something. And remember, like, you hit your head pretty hard, so you didn't know about physics for a long time.
I still don't know about
She still doesn't
physics.
do physics. And to be honest, that was my least favorite. I hated that class. So anyway,
It
mm,
involved math, although
sure did.
I do remember being able to calculate the speed of someone jumping out of a building. Something something times 9.8,
Meters per second squared. Yes. Gravity.
which yes.
I don't know the rest of it. Because
Yeah, I
honestly,
don't
if I'm
either.
jumping out of the building, I'm not going to calculate any of that. I'm just jumping. So
That's what I'm gonna be there for.
you're going to be there to do the math.
Just
I'll
yeah,
be done it by the time you finish the equation, but thank you.
yeah, probably.
That's okay. Do you have anything else you want to throw in here about this? Like, we've covered our points. We're good to go, I
We
think.
I think so. I think what I really want to hear is if any of our listeners, viewers, whatever, whoever is here to join us, do you have any stories of not wearing seatbelts, riding on Harleys, soon
Well,
after
and
being potty trained?
I think the interesting thing I would like to hear from people about is, where did you grow up? Like, were you in the country? Were you in the city? What were your like? What was the expectation when you were growing up? Did you have laws? Because those laws changed over the course of the 80s and the 90s. Seatbelt laws were passed little by little across the country. I think what I read was up until like 1995, the only state by 1995 that didn't have a seatbelt law was New Hampshire. And from what I can tell, they still don't, unless I just missed it. But for the most part, like,
But isn't New Hampshire the live free or die state?
yes,
Well, there you go.
I mean, that makes sense, right? So I'm curious where you
Sure
grew
can.
up, what your laws were, how you follow them. Like, did you have car seats? Were you wearing seat belts? Did you wear helmets if you were on motorcycles riding around with your family members? Like, what was that like? How did you escape Darwin? Because I think it's probably different depending on where you grew up. Comments?
Well, and I think too, like law aside, I would be curious to know when did you decide to follow the law? Because
If
as
you
we
remember.
know, if you remember, because a lot of times those laws were on the books a long time before
Yeah.
behavior really changed. So,
When a lot of the
yeah.
times they were on the books like for a little bit before for people to get used to them before they started like
Oh,
enforcement
enforcing.
via
Yeah.
actual like ticket. So that would be interesting to hear too. So throw that kind of stuff in the comments. Obviously, be sure to like and subscribe. Share with your friends. Get that. Remember, subscribing is free. We said this earlier.
It
So
was free.
you want our content. It's free. Great stuff. Like, and so the drill. Do the thing. Anyway, we'll,
Or don't.
or don't, I
Just
guess.
keep listening, but just know our analytics capture all of you. So we know
They
you're
do.
listening.
And like
And
I said
we
at the
it
beginning, we're pretty punchy today. So we're just going to leave it. Do it or don't do it. It's good to talk to you all again today. T, anything else?
yeah, don't tempt Darwin.
Or do whatever. We'll see you all next time.
Bye
Join us again for
everybody.
something else to complain about.